Okay, we're ready to get started. So we're going to be doing this beautiful painting here, the Lupins by the Sea. We're going to start with the most basic elements of getting the sky, the water, and then this is what really is going to take our time this time, getting this path in, getting these shadows in here and the layers with the flowers, getting our highlights. There's a lot of detail in this painting, so most likely this will be broken up into 2 segments unless we do a speed class, but most likely this is going to be 2 different segments. To start with, let's get our brushes together, and just to be sure everybody knows what brushes we're using. A large flat brush, a medium round brush, and a small round brush for details. Okay. The paints, in case you didn't see the paints, we're going to be using some yellow. I have 2 separate yellows, some phthalo green, some phthalo blue. That's 2 phthalo blues, 2 reds, and a white right in the center. Okay, and a bowl of water will definitely help as well. So let's get started. We'll just go ahead and take those 3 brushes, set them on into the water. I am going to also use a little bit of a larger flat brush for myself because I'm working on such a large canvas, but you don't need to. Any flat brush will do for yours. And we're just going to start simple, as always. We'll start with something easy and then work our way into the more complicated stuff. Okay, so we're going to take our large flat brush and just start by bringing a mixture of phthalo blue and white together. So I'm just going to take some white and just pull it aside like that. Just going to pull it down a bit. And I'm just going to start over here and just bring a little bit, start with just a little bit of phthalo blue. I'm just kind of dipping it in the corner of my brush and mix it in with that white. I do need a good amount of this, so it's maybe almost half the white that I've laid out on my plate. I'm going to use a good amount of this. This is for the sky and for the water. And we'll start with something kind of medium and work our way into darker and lighter. Okay, so starting with a medium, you can always add a little bit of water to your mixture and just start putting paint on the top right side of the canvas. And just go ahead and fill that sky area in. And I'm just using a sort of back and forth motion with my brush, my flat brush. Easy, easy, just kind of bring that sky in there with the back and forth. And right now, we're just going to fill it in. Now I'm using a third of the canvas for my sky. So I'm coming about a third down. With my sky blue. Okay, I'll just give everybody a moment to catch up with that. Okay, so now before we go on to getting the water in there, let's get a little more detail in the sky. To start with, I'm just going to, while the paint is wet, just kind of take my flat brush, dip it in just the corner of it into the white paint. Just a little, get a little bit of white paint on the corner of that brush. So it's still got my light blue on it, but I just added that little bit of extra white by dipping it into the corner of my brush. And now I'm going to come down to that bottom part of the third and just lighten it up a bit. So that's all. I'm not even thinking about clouds yet. Just going to lighten it up along the horizon just a little bit. Just a little bit of light in there. We'll think about clouds in a few minutes. And now just lighten it up. And no detail. Don't worry about getting any sort of detail in there just yet. Okay, so now let's take that same brush and just like we did with lightning, with just dipping the corner in the white, now we're going to dip the corner of that same brush in our phthalo blue again. Okay, just dipping it in the corner of the phthalo blue, just get a little bit more phthalo blue on there. And then just mix it into your light blue. We're just going to go a little bit darker. Going a little bit darker with our phthalo blue. And that's going to come in at the top of the sky. Let's go a little darker at the top. If at any point your paint starts to get a little sticky, just add water to it. So just a little darker at the top. It's up to you how dark you want to go. But it's always nice to try and get this gradual transition from dark to light in the sky. So I go a little bit darker at the top. Maybe a little more phthalo blue. A bit darker. So what you want to have here is, see how I've got this nice smooth transition? A nice blend from darker at the top to lighter at the bottom. And it's about a third of the canvas is being used right now. Okay, excellent. So now this next part is so easy because all we're going to do is just like we did the dark up in the sky, the darker blue up in the sky. Now we're going to create our line where the water begins, and we'll do exactly the same thing. So taking that same large brush, just kind of dip it in our phthalo blue again. Bring it back into that light blue combination. Add a little bit of water. So we got the same darker blue color that we have going on at the top of the sky. Could even go a hint darker if you wanted to. And this is where we do the cutoff line for the ocean. So right about at the third of the canvas, let's bring in a nice deep dark line. Sometimes it takes a few brush strokes to get a straight line here. And sometimes you have to hold your breath, and sometimes you just have to stand back and make sure it's a straight line. And don't worry about it if there's still a little bit of canvas showing through, no big deal. Okay. And once you've got that darker blue, start letting it blend its way down. Okay. Kind of coming down. With that darker blue, I haven't really added any more paint just yet. Just kind of letting it work its way down. And I'll tell you, I'm not going to go real heavy over here on this left triangle where you see the land starts. I am bringing some blue over here, but I'm not going to go too heavy with my paint over here. I want to make sure it gets nice and dry by the time I want to do some painting over here. So let's just kind of fill in our water area. And I'm not using a lot of paint. And we're gonna leave right about a third of the canvas left at the bottom. So just about a third of the canvas is gonna be left white at the bottom. Like I said, on the left side over here, I'm not going to come too heavy at all with my paint, just kind of whatever's extra. Okay, so once you've got at least some blue in here, with that large brush, what I like to do now is just bring in a little bit more of some darker lines throughout the water. We're going to have some darker areas of the blue, and then we're going to have some lighter highlights too. Believe it or not, those light highlights come in way later in the painting. We're not going to worry about those right now because we actually need to have the guidelines of the land and where our foliage ends in order to know where to bring those little kind of waves along the shoreline. So for now, we'll do the darker parts and we'll get the lighter parts in later. So using that same brush, I'm going to do the same thing. Get a little bit more phthalo blue, mix it into my lighter blue, and maybe add a little bit of water to it too, just to get it easier to work with. So again, this is pretty dark. This is about as dark as we had it right at the top of the water. Okay, and then just bringing in a few lines of this darker blue to start. I'm putting in horizontal lines into the water. And just not everywhere, just kind of bringing in some horizontal lines. This will all make more sense once we get our highlights in there. But for now, it's just going to be little areas of darker phthalo blue. And just bringing in horizontal lines. And then once you've got them in there, you can just take the flat side of your brush and just smooth them out a bit. Doesn't look like much of anything just yet, but it will in time. So once you get those lines in there, just kind of take the flat part of your brush. You can even dry your brush a bit too. And just smooth them out of there. We're going to bring in the clouds into the sky. So for those of you who've done clouds, painted with me before, I do clouds in almost every painting. I love doing clouds. These are not too complicated, these clouds here. Here, let me just bring in a little bit closer. Where did I go? Okay, so these clouds are kind of really stretched out thin. Not a lot of detail at all. In fact, some of them just are like little lines of blurry white with maybe just a little hint of detail coming in there. So not a lot of focus on the clouds today, but they are fun. Just the main focus thing to think about is that they're long and stretched out with little points to them here and there. Okay, so let's get some of these clouds in here. I am going to, for my clouds, I'm going to use my medium-sized round brush. Take it on out of the water. And I'm going to go right into my white paint to start. Maybe get a little tiny bit of light blue on there, just to start. Just a little tiny bit of the light blue that we used in the sky. Okay, and let's start with a cloud, maybe over here on the right side. And I'm just going to start with a line. Just a line with a very light blue. Come on in with a line. Okay. Maybe bring in a couple of that light blue. Bring in a couple of lines, especially on the horizon. Right now we're just doing the light blue. A couple of lines on the horizon. Try to get them coming as straight as you can. This also helps to define our horizon line. So just starting with a couple of lines, and we'll make them grow from there. So this is the light blue. Maybe a couple of lines on the left over here as well. Very simple to start. Okay, so once you've got those very simple white lines in here, let's get a little more complicated. So taking that same brush, no need to rinse it or anything. Just dip it in the white paint, just pure white paint now. Just go ahead and get some white paint on that brush. And we'll take just any of those lines you started with. Okay, and just go over any of those lines that you started with. Kind of bring this along the top of that line, nice and thick, the white paint. Just bring in a little horizontal line. Maybe it comes about that long to start. So all we're doing now is just bringing in pure white, bringing a nice little layer of thicker paint on top of what was already there. Okay, and now we're going to make that grow into a cloud. So the paint is nice and thick. I'm going to take my brush. So this is still that round brush, and I'm going to push it into the canvas like this, straight on, as if I was pushing a pin into the wall. Okay, so start somewhere on the right side, towards the right side of that white, and just start moving it in a little bit of circular motion. It's not leaving the canvas at all. It's just kind of moving in a little bit of a circular motion. Very small little circles. And then every now and then, just let one of those circles wiggle its way up and back down again into a little peak. Let me show you what just happened when I did that. So it just kind of wiggled its way into a little bit of a peak. And I'm going to get a couple of those on this line as I go along. So I'm going to keep on going, that same white. Just let it wiggle its way around, circles, little circles, and then every now and then a little peak comes up. Some can be bigger than others. You might have to refresh your white paint every now and then. Add a little bit more white paint every now and then. And then whoop, there's another little peak. So they're just little circles. Little peaks on there, and then it just kind of tapers off at the ends. There's not really any little peaks when it comes towards the edge because they're real stretched out clouds. Very little detail. We're going to do a couple of these clouds in the sky. It's kind of up to you how many you want. I always try to go with an uneven number, whatever I'm doing. Try to avoid having an even number. And try to avoid having them all look exactly the same. Like if you notice, this one's got it's a little bit wider than the others. So and maybe one or two of them just barely have anything on them, just nothing, just a little white line. So this is where we're going to kind of get into doing our own thing together. So just finding a couple more of those lines, and let's say we do one over here this time. Here's a nice line. I'm going to come back in nice and thick with my white paint towards the top of that. Re-emphasize that line. Stretch it out a bit. Get some nice thick white paint on there. And just start that little wiggle process. So it's just little circles going around and around like this, but don't leave the canvas. Okay. And every now and then it just jumps up. Maybe a little bit more this time just to be different. And then comes back down. And then let it stretch its way out at the very end. No detail at all. So you can even go back in after you make the cloud if you want to change it up, change up the shape. Make some of your little points stand out a little bit more. It's up to you. I'm just going to keep going. Let me know if you need me to stop and show you anything specifically. And there's another one up here. Nice white one. And they don't all have to be the same size. Some of these can be just tiny little clouds. Some can be big ones that take up the whole page. Okay, so it looks like everybody is doing good with their clouds. Any questions about the clouds at all? Okay, excellent. So just these very simple clouds in the sky, because we don't want them competing with the main focus of our detail, which is going to be the flowers and the shadows, light and shadows in the sand dunes. So at this point, let's get our sand dunes in there, and we'll build on top of the sand dunes. We'll build the foliage on top of them. But just to get started, let's make a sand dune sort of color. So I'm going to use my medium size round brush and give it a good rinse. So give it a good rinse. Now the sand color is actually going to be very similar to a skin tone color. We're going to, in fact, that you would mix these same colors if you were doing a portrait and doing a skin tone. So we're going to use that same medium round brush, get a little bit of water on there. And let's just start by mixing our red and yellow together. So red and yellow, and just let those two kind of come together. Let's say they're about equal. And add a little bit of water to that mixture. Add a little bit of water, get it a little bit watery. Red and yellow, and then add some white to it. A nice big chunk of white, like that. And lighten it up and get a really pretty salmon-y color. And you blend that all together. Okay, so far this is what I've got, which is not any of our skin tones just yet. I don't know, you may have the skin tone sometimes if you've got a really bad burn at the beach or something. But what happens when we add a little bit of its complementary, this is an orangey tone. When we add a little bit of its complementary color, which is blue, it really changes, it changes the look of it dramatically. So let's just we'll start with just a little bit, and we'll add more as we go along, but just ever so gently dip the tip of your brush into your blue paint with phthalo blue. Ever so gently, start with a little bit, and don't use all of that mixture that you've made. Maybe take about half of it And mix in a little bit of that phthalo blue. Okay. So this is giving us a very warm, sandy gray color, which is exactly what I want to start off with my sand dunes. So I'm using about half of that, making a nice little mixture. Does everybody have something along those lines? Kind of a sandy, grayish, but very warm color, very warm. Okay. So we're going to start by filling in part of our bottom third. Now this isn't going to take up the whole area. We are going to have a lot of our foliage in here. And it's okay if we do some overlapping. Like, don't worry about getting it just in the right spot, because we're going to be doing a whole lot of overlapping in this painting. So just follow along as best you can as far as the placement. Don't worry too much about getting it just right. So coming on down to that bottom third that's still white, and I'm just going to start bringing in some of this color here. And I'm just kind of keeping it a little bit still left dark on the, a little bit of the canvas blank on the bottom, a little bit on top. Just kind of bringing in a little strip of this color right here. And it's straight across at first. So you just gotta doesn't even go to the halfway point of the painting. It's like a third, it's straight. But then what happens is it starts to get a climb in elevation here. So now, start bringing it up, and a little bit of elevation going on. We have a little bit of a fill happening. And I'm going to take this up into the water at an angle, and then just kind of let it round itself out. Okay, everybody see that? So it starts off straight over here, and then it takes a little turn before it gets to the halfway point, and then just starts climbing up the hill. And a little bit of an angle like this. Now if you notice, it's not quite as thick up here as it is down here. I'm getting a little bit thinner. Now, if anybody's unsure about this part, as far as the placement goes, feel free to either hold it up or send me a message. This is kind of an important foundation part of the painting. As far as placement goes, we're going to place everything else around this. Excellent, you guys are doing so good. All right, so let's just keep going with it. So at this point, I do want to bring some little hills out from this hill. I do have a couple of places where it just kind of jets out a little bit into the water. So let's start maybe about halfway down this hill. Let's get one little piece that just kind of makes its way out and makes a little hill. You can connect it, it's fine to connect it. And then a little bit further down, there's another one too. little smaller. I've just got a couple little hills coming out. You can just fill them in, that's fine. So as to avoid confusion. Okay, and now let's add another little, what would we call this? A little peninsula coming out here. So this is a little bit higher up. It's kind of a few inches below our horizon line. And even though you won't see any of it back here, we might as well start it from back here, just so you can see it kind of coming out. So it's just a little line. It's going to make its way out till about a third. Yeah, right about a third of the canvas. So I'm just going to have it come out like a little peninsula. Not much detail, just a little peninsula, that's all. A little piece of land making its way out. And then that's about a third of the canvas over. Okay. And it's about just a little bit below, an inch or so below the horizon line. Okay, so now while we've still got this color, and please let me know if I'm going too fast for anybody. While we've still got this color on our brush, add a little bit of white to just a corner of it. So while you've got the color on your brush, just take some, dip it into your white paint, and then just bring it on into a little corner of the color that you just made. So we're just lightening up a little corner of the color we just used. Okay, just a little corner of it. And lighten it up with a good amount of white. It's going to need a good amount of white. Okay. So now we're going to start by bringing in a little bit of a highlight on top of the hills. So starting with this one here, just coming into the top of it, and just bring in a little bit of a highlight color. And I'm just sticking to the top with this. And the same with this one down here, just at the top. Bring in a little bit of a highlight. And the same with our little peninsula out here. Gets a little highlight on the top. Okay, and once you've done that, just kind of scrape the paint off. And we're gonna switch to a different brush. So I'll give you a few minutes to get that detail in there. Okay, so now I'm gonna switch on over to my smaller brush. Go back into that same light highlight color. So this is just a small round brush. And just get some of that light highlighty color. This is where, starting at the tops of those little hills, I'm just going to drag in some little dashes of this light color in towards the path. This is where we're going to start creating the look of the path. So instead of solid color now, we're going to start working more in dashes. So as we kind of come in from the hill, just bring in some little dashes of light. We're also going to be keeping our dashes, both the highlights and the shadow, horizontal at this point. Okay. Maybe a few little dashes underneath the top of our highlight, just to kind of break up the hill a little bit. And we kind of alternate back and forth, come back in with our darker color too. But for now, let's work on our highlights. Sophie, that I know it doesn't look like much yet, but it really is going to come together. Right now, we're just getting the beginning of those highlights, but think about like once we get the shadows blended in there, and then we have to get the foliage in between these little hills too. It will really make a difference. Right now, it doesn't look like much of anything, I know. All right, so now I'd like to bring some highlights onto the left side of the path. So if you think about it, the light is coming from over here, from behind. So you're going to have all this foliage coming up here. So part of your path is going to be blocked, or it's going to be in shadow, and then part of it is going to be in light. So this is the part where we're going to start seeing light. So again, let's just kind of work in dashes on the left side of the path. Just bring in some little dashes of light. And again, keeping it horizontal. This is a little bit of slow work, but it really is going to pay off. So again, keeping my highlights a little bit more on the left side. Bring it to dashes so it's not completely covering over what's already there. Just a little bit of a close-up here if anybody wants to see that. It doesn't look like much of anything just yet. But this color is going to create a really nice contrast with our shadows. Okay, so at this point, let's take a little break from doing the highlights. We are going to come back in and add some more highlights afterwards, but it'll be a little bit more after we get some shadows in there and after we get our foliage in. So try to hold on a little bit to a little bit of that highlight color. If not, it's easy to make again. For the moment though, let us start making a little bit of a shadow color. So does everybody still have some of that original skin tone color we mixed up? With the red, yellow, and white, with a little bit of blue. So let's take a little bit of that and add, with this, I'm still working with my small brush, add just a little hint of green into that, just a little hint of green. And that is going to make a really nice shadow for the plants. They're sitting on top of it. So just a little hint of green mixed into that is going to make a nice shadow color. Okay, so I'm using my small brush. And now we're going to let some of the shadow blend into the highlights. So starting, I'm going to kind of take it right to, whoops, actually I'm going to add a little bit more green to that. I want it to be dark enough so it does stand out. Okay, so there we go. That's a nice shadow color. Okay, so bring it right on up to the top of that sandy color. And then start bringing some dashes of it inward towards our highlights. So just little dashes kind of coming inwards, in towards those highlights. blend it into a few of those highlights as well.
Did you start by kind of doing the whole top of the little beach area there?
Yeah, I just did a little line right there and then let it start working its way towards the highlights. And again, I'm just kind of doing little dashes here. And letting it just kind of come right up to, and in some cases, a few dashes right into our highlight colors. So that's going to be, we'll take this all along the way up the path, the same thing. It's a little bit of a shadowy color. If you're unsure about your shadowy color, just send me a picture. But just letting it kind of bump into our highlights. Even maybe a few up there too. And just a little foundation here. It's just starting to get our shadows in. There's a little detail. Close them nice and thick with the shadows. Great. So now, what we're going to do next is kind of put things into context, our light and shadow into context here, and by bringing in some of our foliage. And it will now start making a little bit more sense what we've been doing once we get the foliage in there. We will be starting with our darkest areas first, and then building up towards going lighter. So we'll start with our dark areas first. And I'm going to use, again, I'm going to just rinse off that medium-sized brush, medium round. Give that a nice rinse because we're going to go really dark with this. So try to get all the light color off of it if you can. As much as possible. Okay, so once you've got a nice clean brush, let's take a nice big scoop of blue and mix in a nice big scoop of green as well. So half blue, half green. You want a nice, deep, deep, shadowy blue-green. So this is the phthalo blue, the phthalo green. Okay. And the first thing I'm going to do is define my, my sand dunes. So once you've got your blue-green color, let's first bring it in here, right up on the very tip of our, top of our sand. Just bring a nice little line of it in there. So just starting with the very tippity top, just get a little shadow in there, or at the start of our foliage here. Okay, now I'm going to start working my way up the hill. So right about where this first little bump starts, I'm going to cut it off right about there, so just the tip of it shows up. And start working my way uphill here. And then just kind of have it come to a point. So all you're seeing is just the very tippity top of that first hill. Let me bring it a little bit closer so you can see. And even that, a lot of it's going to get covered over with our flowers. Now the next one is really interesting because it's kind of coming into the bottom part of the other sand dune and wrapping its way around the top of this sand dune. So let's start about halfway up this little sand dune here. Bring in a nice little base. Comes and cuts off the bottom of this one. Oops. Can everybody see that? And then the same thing is going to happen on this sand dune about halfway up. Just going to bring in a little bit of this dark color. And then that's going to make its way up. Okay, so I'm just going to kind of go over that again, just in case anybody kind of a little bit lost there. So it was just bringing up that dark, shadowy blue-green on top of here, and then it just kind of lifts underneath the first sand dune, on top of that, and then underneath the second sand dune, on top of that second one, and then up to the top of the hill. And that's all with that dark, dark blue-green. So mixture of blue and green. Phthalo blue, phthalo green. So now once we've got that, we've just got the foundation laid in here. So let's go and start building up some of the foliage here, and it's really going to start coming together. So using that same medium-sized round brush, that's in that same dark blue-green color. Let's start with this part down here. This is the easiest. And all I'm going to do is just kind of dashing in, and I'm using that same push-in motion with the brush, just kind of pushing it in, and just kind of creating some little splotches of very dark shadow color in here. Kind of pushing it in. We're just coming up a couple of inches with this color. Right from the base. You want it to be as dark as the base. And let this be at a little bit of a triangle, a little bit higher out here, and then it tapers off as it gets closer to that hill. A little higher on the right side. And it just kind of tapers off a little bit as it gets closer to that hill. Excellent. Okay. So now let's keep on going with this same pattern. So got some nice deep dark foliage here. Let's do the same thing over here. So starting kind of behind that little sand dune, just kind of come in and bring a little bit of the layer. And this is going to partially cover our other sand dune. That's okay. We just need a little bit of it to peek through. And I'm just using that pushing in sort of motion. Break up the edge of it. And I'm going to keep doing it the same pattern on top of the next sand dune. And it's going to work its way up. And this is where it's going to start covering over our little island up here. And that's okay. This is going to come all the way up to our water line and beyond into the sky. So now let's get that same dark blue-green color. If you have to make some more of it, it's just blue and green to mix together. It's a nice dark shadow color. Let's get that in right at the very bottom of the canvas. The same way we did these, just kind of splash it on in there. Nice deep color with a turquoisey shadow color down here. You want it to be nice and dark. And let it kind of come in at an angle the way everything else is. A little bit of a triangle. But have it all along the bottom part of the canvas for sure. So just kind of blend it in, do it a little bit of a triangle, but especially all along the bottom, we want a nice deep shadow color coming in here. So if you look at the path of the original painting, there's just one more little layer of shadow coming down the hill here. So we're just going to lay the foundation for it right now. Okay, so it's just beneath the hill, just kind of dot in a little bit of this blue-green. If you've run out, you can just make a little bit more. It's just a blue-green, and it's just below the top of that, the highlighted area of the path. Just going to put a little layer of this dark blue-green in here coming down the hill. This will all make sense once we start getting all the other colors in. And it just kind of bumps into the other path right here. So now I think for tonight we have maybe 2 more steps that we can get in here. And that is, because we'll need some drying time. So we're going to build up our foliage a little bit to start getting the effects of the plants coming in here. So just building it, but not to the brightest highlight. We'll leave that for next week. But for now, we're just gonna kind of start bringing in some of our greens. And we'll just get a little bit of more shadow area. In fact, that's what I think I want to start with first before anything else. We're going to deepen our shadows a little bit before we do anything else. All right. So, Sophie, you just sent me a picture. So, you cut off your path. Oh, that's okay, Sophie. You can just let that here. Let me just zoom in on that a bit. That is totally fine. All you have to do is just bring that green in so it just kind of meets up with the other.
Like the two knolls, like higher up, I brought my green all the way over. Oh,
I see what you did. That's okay. You can do one of two things. You can use the flowers to break it up, or when we come back in, we do have to go back in and do more highlights next week. So it's one or the other. You can either make highlights there or make flowers there. Oh, it's coming out so good though. Okay, so now let's switch on over to our small brush. And let's just water down a little bit of that color that we just used, that deep blue green. Add a little bit of water to it with a small brush, and you'll see why in a second. So watering it down makes it a little less, a little more translucent on the path. So what we're going to do is just bring in a few more dashes of this darker shadow color into the path. Okay, just using, and make sure it's nice and watery. That really does make a difference. So underneath your dark foliage, you want to have some equally dark shadows coming into the path. Well, maybe not equally dark because it's watered down. But I'm just bringing some dashes of that same color that I used up in the foliage, just bringing some little dashes of that down into the shadow area. So again, this is just a watery version of the shadow, the dark blue green. And I'm bringing some dashes of it down into the shadow area. Make sure it's nice and watery. That makes a difference. Small brush. These are our deepest shadows underneath the foliage. And that's going to be anywhere we've got this dark green color. And let's just bring it in underneath, dashes of it. A nice deep shadow. Keeping those brush strokes horizontal. find just so many layers in this painting. Wow. So here I'm coming in a little bit closer so you can see. Little dashes in there. Okay, so we're going to do one more step before we pause the painting until next week. And that is we're just going to fill in a little bit more of our foliage, get the basic structure of what is there. And then next week, we'll start bringing in our highlights, and we'll bring in our flowers too. We'll also bring a little bit more detail and structure into this area back here. We're going to bring in our waves into the ocean. That's all to look forward to next week. But for now, let's go into that medium-sized brush. Give it a good rinse. And this time, I'm just going to go in with a mixture of my phthalo green and some yellow. Phthalo green and some yellow. I'm going to go nice and thick with this. Nice and thick. This is going to be a great layer here. Okay, so I guess I'll start. I've been kind of starting over here on the right, so let's keep up with that. So starting in, that's phthalo green and yellow. Starting in the middle of that, let's see, is that different enough? Yeah, it is. I'm going to be doing, instead of the splotches that I had been using to lay in the shadow areas, now I'm going to start giving it a little bit more structure. And the brush stroke I'm going to use for this, instead of this pushing in motion, now I'm going to be moving it a little more like...
Your mic went away.
Oh, I must have bumped into it the wrong way. Is it back? Oh, hold on one second. I'm going to demonstrate this step. Okay, so instead of using this pushing in sort of motion, I'm going to be using like almost like little X's, this sort of motion, just to get a little bit more, and I'm going nice and thick with my paint, and I'm going to just give it, it gives it a little bit more of the feel, and really thick with the paint so you can see it. It looks like little leaves. So this is towards the middle, and actually this is over the whole painting. I mean, through the whole area of foliage. It's not completely covering over what I have. It's just kind of adding another layer to it and even growing up a little bit higher than what's already there. So if you can see what I just did, I'm just going up a little bit higher in some spots. And just, this is really adding a nice layer on top of what's already there. nice and thick with my paint. I'm going to do this everywhere I've got the blue-green. I'm just going to let it go a little bit higher each time. Oops. Oh, I'm sorry. I just had it on gallery view that whole time. Can everybody see me a little bit better now? Okay. So let me just show you again what I've been doing. So using that same green, yellow, nice and thick paint, and just kind of going over anywhere I've got that blue-green in the foliage, going over it with little X's, working up just a little bit higher on each of these little mounds of foliage. And I'm going to take it all the way through the painting, everywhere, including down here at the bottom. So it goes into it's not completely covering over the blue-green, but it is going on top of it. So you'll still see a little bit of that blue-green underneath. This is just a layer. Little X's. So I think at this point, we need to let it rest until next class, because we want to let everything dry, and I really feel like to give this painting the right amount of attention that it needs in detail, we do need to do a whole nother class for this. So next week, I want to focus on really getting this balance between highlight and shadow happening in the path, because, and we will need to adjust some of the colors. We'll have to warm up our highlight a little bit. It's a little too cool on mine. And bring a few of our highlights into the foliage even. And you'll see what I mean by that next week. We also have all these gorgeous waves happening along the shoreline that we need to bring in next week. We need to bring in the lightest part of our foliage, and then of course these beautiful flowers, which is a whole thing in itself. But everybody did an amazing job today. Thank you all for joining me. And this is going to be available on YouTube as well when it's done. I can get it up. I should be able to get it on there by tomorrow.
We're taking a trip next week, so I won't be